Have you ever walked through campus and almost fell from hitting a large chip or stepping on a missing piece of concrete? More than likely, this has probably happened while you're staring at somebody that you know or looking at that special crush that you've had that you never really have the confidence to say hi to. Well, you end up looking like an idiot either way, and you almost bust your face and you think, man, what is EKU doing? Why is there this missing piece of concrete? And then you see that person standing there snickering at you, and you really want to know what has caused this. Well, this happens a lot more than it really should because there's very, very easy ways to prevent this. But first, let's start with the causes. One thing that could have caused this would have been overfinishing the concrete. Well, when you're finishing concrete, they bring this machine in, looks like a drum, and it vibrates. And what it does is it pulls the air out of the concrete. Well, what happens when you do this is all the aggregates, which are like the gravelly pieces that are in there, settle to the bottom. And when that happens, you bring all the top layer of water and cement, creating this really weak, thin layer on the top, thus giving the cracking that you see and the chipping, because there's no bonding agents to hold it together. A prime example of this on campus is right around the Daniel Boone statue. If you notice all the concrete that's been finished there, there's all kinds of cracking around it. This is mainly due to the contractor overfinishing, not to mention the fact that they picked a smooth finish to do this with. That is the worst thing you could ever do outdoors because when it's rain, people are going to fall. That's just a lawsuit waiting to happen. Another issue that could have arisen would be temperature changes from hot and cold, causing the concrete to expand and to contract. When the temperature gets hot, the concrete expands. When it gets cold, it shrinks. This could cause chips in the concrete, thus letting water in. When the water gets in, it acts as a catalyst, causing it to crack and chip even more. An example of this freeze thaw could be very easily seen at the top of the sidewalk behind Sullivan Hall. The concrete is broken off and in horrible shape. Another big issue with concrete is when salts hit it. Salts are very harmful to concrete and they do not get washed off very well afterwards. It just sits until the rain gets in. It's really hard to tell on campus where this happens because there's so many other problems, but I'm sure the fact that we had Snowmageddon this year really didn't help anything. Now that we know what caused the problems, let's worry more on what precautions should have been taken so that you didn't trip and fall in front of that person that you already know. All concrete cracks inevitably, but there's certain things you can do in order to keep these cracks from getting larger. Some of these things you can do are the use of rebar or at least a wire mesh. This will allow the concrete to hold onto that metal in the rebar, keeping the cracks that form tighter together. Another thing that would have helped would have been a control joint. Control joints are those lines you see that you don't want to step on and break your mother's back. But what they really are a forced crack in the concrete to make sure that it doesn't crack across in other sections. If you don't have a control joint in a large span, it is inevitable that it will crack across. But every control joint you put will allow it to crack in that spot and let it go no further. The contractor needs to be aware of how much is overfinishing. You see, if he overfinishes, like we talked about earlier, all the aggregates sink to the bottom and it is inevitable that the top layer is going to chip off like the Daniel Boone statue. And last, you should always use some sort of sealer on the top in order to help keep concrete from being harmed from things such as salts. This will also help keep water out of the cracks that are already precast in the concrete that you can't help, thus making it last considerably longer. So is it really your fault if you fall in front of your friend? No. It's the lack of rebar, control joints, good contractors, and the role of nature. It's always going to freeze thaw. Good contractors are hard to come by. Control joints are never really used enough, and rebar is not a standard thing used by EKU. So don't feel bad if you fall in front of somebody. Just tell them all the reasons that the concrete shouldn't have been broken in the first place. All information in this speech has been either obtained through personal job experience or through Dr. Anthony Lamanna.